preside over this. They want this. They want to keep an arm's length from this. Let this be a Senate issue. If Biden has to show up to settle it, maybe he would, but that would give Reid a leeway of one more vote if he loses.
So we're going to take you inside now, where the Senate has just gavelled in. We expect Vice President Joe Biden to begin the day by swearing in Ed Markey, former House member from Massachusetts who won a special election a couple of weeks ago. Live coverage now of the U.S. Senate on C-SPAN 2.
And the praise from our mortal lips, for you alone are omnipotent. Shine your light upon the challenging path which our lawmakers must walk, dispelling the shadows of doubt and division. Lord, use our senators as instruments of your glory, keeping their faith strong as they trust you to order their steps and choreograph their destinies. May their labors bring solace to the needy, the marginalized, the lost, the lonely, and the least. Help them to remember that they are your servants, called to serve your purposes in their generation. And Lord, we ask your special blessings on our new lawmaker, Senator Markey, as he is sworn in today. We pray in your sacred name. Amen.
Please join me in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. President.
The Senator from Illinois.
Mr. President, the Majority Leader will be on the floor very briefly, and at this point I suggest the absence of quorum.
The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Alexander. Ms. Ayotte. Ms. Baldwin.
So we can see the Vice President, Joe Biden, there in the chair presiding over the Senate. And we expect that swearing in for Ed Markey to happen shortly. Ed Markey, a longtime member of the House, Democrat from Massachusetts, winning a special election a couple of weeks ago. That vacancy in Massachusetts created after former Senator John Kerry resigned from the Senate and became Secretary of State in the Obama administration. Congressional Quarterly writes about today's filibuster action that Senate leaders are still talking today after a 3.5-hour joint caucus Monday evening failed to head off a threat by Majority Leader Harry Reid to do away with filibusters on executive branch nominations. Senator Reid insisting that Republicans agree to the approval of 7 nominees on which Mr. Reid has filed cloture motions that cut off debate last week, before he backs away from plans to use the nuclear option to change rules, and he would do that through a gambit that utilizes just a simple majority of 51 votes. CQ goes on to say the first vote scheduled for this morning on Richard Cordray to be permanent head of the Consumer Financial Bureau, and that vote scheduled for about an hour from now at 11 a.m. So we'll watch Vice President Biden. We expect Senator-elect Markey to be on the floor shortly. Our live coverage continuing here on C-SPAN 2 of the Senate. We expect shortly to see Majority Leader Harry Reid. He normally comes out to begin the Senate's day. We'll see what he has to say on those potential filibuster rules changes. Then we do see the Vice President Biden there presiding over the Senate. He'll be swearing in Democrat Ed Markey, Senator-elect Ed Markey from Massachusetts. We'd also like to hear what you think. You can see right on your screen there our hashtag if you'd like to tweet at C-SPAN Chat. Tell us what you think about what's going on in the Senate.
Mr. Bennett. Mr. Blumenthal.
President,
Majority Leader.
we're in a quorum call. Is that true?
That's correct.
I ask unanimous consent that it be vitiated.
Without objections, vitiated.
Mr. President, what is the business before the Senate?
The swearing in of the senator from Massachusetts. The chair lays before the Senate a certificate of election to fill the vacancy created by the resignation of Senator John F. Kerry of Massachusetts. The certificate, the chair is advised, is in the form suggested by the Senate. If there is no objection, the reading of the certificate will be waived and it will be printed in full in the record. If the senator-elect will now present himself...
Mr. President, yes, reserving the right to object. I know a lot of people want to say some real nice things about this good man, but you're going to have to do it later. We have a lot of things to do here, and as he will learn, the Senate is not always as punctual as the House. So all those who have these wonderful things to say about this good man, do it later.
If the senator-elect will now present himself at the desk, the chair will administer the oath. In that step here. All right. Raise your right hand. Okay. I'm going to read the whole thing straight through. Please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear that you will support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic, that you will bear true faith and allegiance to the same, that you take this obligation freely, without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion, and that you will well and faithfully discharge the duties of the office on which you're about to enter, so help you God?
I do.
Congratulations, Senator.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Mr. President, what is
Majority Leader.
What is the business before this body?
The motion to proceed to S1238. Majority Leader. It's pending.
Okay, Mr. President, I am told that S1292 is due for a second reading.
The clerk will read the title of the bill for the second time.
S1292, a bill to prohibit the funding of the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act.
Get out of here.
Mr. President, I object to this.
Objection having been heard, the bill will be placed on the calendar under Rule 14.
Good work.
Mr. President, I ask consent the Senate proceed to executive session and resume consideration of calendar number 51.
Is there objection? Without objection, so ordered. Clerk will report the nomination.
Nomination, Bureau of Consumer Financial Protection, Richard Cordray of Ohio to be Director.
Spent the time until I ask, Mr. President, that the time until 11 a.m. be equally divided and controlled.
Is there objection? Without objection, so ordered.
So at 11 a.m. there will be a cloture vote on the nomination of Richard Cordray to be Director of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. If cloture is invoked, there will be up to 8 hours of debate on the nomination.
Who yields time? Will the Senator withhold that suggestion? The Senator from Arizona is recognized.
Mr. President, we are, after a required amount of debate, we are going to move forward with the Cordray nomination, which has been held up for some period of time. I would like to thank everybody on both sides of the aisle who have engaged in this debate and discussion. I'd particularly like to thank all of my colleagues last night who engaged in a maybe long, which is our custom, but I think productive discussion of the many of the issues that separate us, particularly this impending possible what many of us believe to be crisis in the history of the United States Senate. And I want to thank both our leaders, Senator McConnell and Senator Reid, and so many others who have been actively engaged in the conversations that have been going on. I look forward to the vote as soon as possible on Mr. Cordray. I thank all of my colleagues for an evening that I thought was very important in our relations in the United States Senate.
Majority Leader.
Mr. President, we may have a way forward on this. I feel fairly confident, but it's, as you know, that's why we need that time. So what we're going to do is go into quorum. I think everyone would be well advised if they didn't talk about a lot of substantive matters. If we want to talk about Senator Markey, that's fine. But we have a few little I's to dot and T's to cross, and I need my, I have to speak to the Vice President. We're going to have a phone call with Durbin, Schumer, and Murray, so everything's doing well. Now, Mr. President, I will say that I hope that everyone learned the lesson last night, that it sure helps to sit down and talk to each other, or either stand and talk, whatever it is. It was a very, very good meeting. It lasted 4 hours. People were still as highly engaged at the end of that 4 hours as they were at the beginning. So I think we see a way forward that will be good for everybody. And there are a lot of accolades to go around to a lot of people, and I certainly appreciate my wonderful caucus. One of my senators told me this morning, and I don't mean this to, something like this will give a person a lot of humility. That person, that senator, said to me, doesn't matter what you ask me to do, I will do it. So I would hope that this is not a time to flex muscles, but it's a time I'm going to tell one person and no one else how much I appreciate their advocacy, their persuasiveness, persistence, and I'm trying to think of a word that really describes this man. It's hard to find. I was told by another senator, do you know what this man did? I said, you know who he reminds me of? Bob Kerrey. I hope that's not doesn't disparage John McCain, but John McCain is the reason we're at the point we are. A lot of people have been extremely helpful, but this is all directed toward John McCain from me. No one was able to break through but for him. And he does it at his own peril. And so everyone, we're going to have caucuses day. We'll explain in more detail the direction we're headed. I think everyone will be happy. Everyone will not be, oh man, we got everything we wanted. But I think it's going to be something that is good for the Senate. It is a compromise. And I think we get what we want, and they get what they want. Not a bad deal. I would note they have some quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Alexander.
So you heard Majority Leader Reid there suggest that negotiations at least are taking place, have taken place. He specifically thanked Senator John McCain. Here's how Politico is reporting the story this morning. Politico writes that Senate Democrats are close to having the 60 votes needed to advance the long-stalled nomination of Richard Cordray to head the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, according to Senate sources, potentially giving senators more time to reach a deal to avert the nuclear option. The Senate still faces a potentially historic vote later Tuesday on changing its filibuster rules on other executive branch nominations, although high-level talks are ongoing. Again, this is Politico. They go on to quote Senator John Thune of South Dakota, the Republican, saying, "I think the question is whether there will be some accommodation for Republicans on the National Labor Relations Board nominations. Democrats want to approve Sharon and Richard Griffin to the NLRB, but Republicans are balking as they question whether those recess appointments are constitutional, and they await a Supreme Court decision this fall. Instead, Republicans are hoping to slot in 2 new Democratic-chosen NLRB members in place of Block and Griffin, a move sure to rile up the liberal wing of the party." Politico goes on to say that 98 of the body's 100 senators met late into the night on Monday, and generally senators were buoyed by the more than 3-hour meeting, most members emerging from the old Senate chamber devoid of water, food, or bathrooms to issue general platitudes to reporters about the good work that went on inside there. Senator Reid swearing the senators to secrecy. That again, how Politico reporting the story this morning. We're going to continue to watch the Senate. We're always interested in what you have to say. You can see the Twitter hashtag there, hashtag C-SPAN chat if you'd like to tweet. We also plan to take some of your phone calls and emails around 12:30 Eastern here on C-SPAN 2.
Ms. Baldwin.
Our coverage continuing of the Senate today. A short while ago, Majority Leader Harry Reid on the floor suggesting that senators may be close to an agreement on those executive nominations, saying that some phone calls needed to be made, some caucusing needed to take place, so they were doing that off the floor. In the meantime, we've been asking you what you think. You see the hashtag there, hashtag C-SPAN chat. Here's some of what you say. James Hendricks tweeting, "I'm not sure what's going to happen today in the Senate, but there needs to be movement." Tyler Murphy says, "Congratulations to Senator Ed Markey, sworn in as our newest U.S. Senator just moments ago." Senator Markey sworn in by the Vice President, Senator becoming the new Senator from Massachusetts. And Andrew tweets, "Let's go Senate, start working for the people." Again, we're going to take your tweets throughout the morning and throughout the day, and about 12:30 Eastern we'll be on the air with your phone calls and your emails as we continue our coverage today of the U.S. Senate.
Mr. President.
Senator from Wyoming.
Mr. President, I'd ask that the quorum call be set aside.
Without objection.
Mr. President, I want to speak today on the nomination of Richard Cordray to be the Director of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. I want to speak against this confirmation. Why is this nomination important? Once the director is approved by Congress, by the Senate, not all of Congress, just by the Senate, we no longer have any control over a bureau that collects everyone's financial records in detail and can cancel a loan up to 180 days even if both parties to the loan are happy. Mr. Cordray was recess appointed. I think it was because the President thought that he wouldn't be approved by Congress. So what I'm about to tell you already is under the direction of this nominee. That recess appointment put him in charge of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. Sounds like a good title. But the reason this is of utmost concern to me, and has been for the past 3 years, is the lack of congressional oversight and blatant privacy intrusions of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, the CFPB. The Dodd-Frank Act, which created the CFPB, has been a hot topic of conversation since its passage in 2010. There are a lot of important discussions about different parts of the bill and some of the consequences we're seeing now 3 years down the road. These are all important conversations to have, but today I'm focusing on the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. The Bureau, as allowed by the Dodd-Frank Act, could collect up to $600 million every year, but is not subject to the congressional appropriations process. The same congressional appropriations process that approves the budgets of other agencies like the Security and Exchange Commission and the Federal Trade Commission. Instead, the agency is funded through the revenues from the Federal Reserve before the revenues come to the Treasury, funds that are supposed to be remitted to the Treasury for deficit reduction. Some might ask, isn't there a cap to the funding available to CFPB? Yes, there is, but here's what it looks like. The cap was 10% of the federal revenues for fiscal year 2010, 11% for fiscal year 2012, and there'll be 12% for fiscal year 2013, with an inflation factor each and every year after that. This means 12% of the combined earnings of the Federal Reserve System, which was $4.98 billion in 2009. At that time, 10% would have been $500 million. These numbers are astonishing, and anyone saying that the Bureau isn't funded by taxpayers is trying to pull a sleight of hand. The funds may not come directly from the Treasury, but taxpayers are going to have to take up the slack for funds they are no longer receiving from the Federal Reserve. Not sure how we do that constitutionally, to move somebody outside and still take federal money. In addition, the director of the Bureau has unlimited discretion over how the agency's money, these hundreds of millions of dollars I just talked about, is spent. Let me repeat that. The director of the Bureau has unlimited discretion over how the agency's money is spent. He doesn't submit a budget. Nothing's approved. Not only that, the director is allowed to put fines and penalties collected by the Bureau into a slush fund that it does not have to return to the Treasury like other agencies have to do. Do you think that might encourage a lot of fines and penalties by this Bureau? I think it would. I don't think it ought to be done that way. The same director that has so much unchecked authority doesn't even answer to the Office of Management and Budget and only has to submit routine financial information to the office. There's also no Inspector General for this Bureau. Here's one example of why that's a problem. The Dodd-Frank Act expressly exempted auto dealers from the oversight purview of the Bureau. They listened to me when this bill was passing and found out that loans could be canceled within 180 days by the Bureau without the approval of the automobile dealer or the person that bought the automobile. However, the Bureau doesn't think auto dealers should be exempt from oversight, so it's found ways to exert itself through the banks. Banks are now looking at auto loans made, and the Bureau has issued its first significant penalty in connection with the vehicle financing. The Bureau has also issued what it calls a Fair Lending Guidance Bulletin directed at institutions that make indirect automobile loans. In it, the Bureau says that indirect lenders will be viewed as participants in any discriminatory pricing by dealers due to their role in the auto loan credit decision process, and suggests lenders impose controls on dealer markup and compensation policies. Is this revenge for them getting an exemption in the bill? The Bureau's interpretation of Dodd-Frank and this guidance will have wide ramifications for indirect lenders and ultimately auto dealers. And because the bulletin issued is considered guidance, get that, guidance, not a rule, there's been no opportunity for the public, including consumers, lenders, and dealers, to comment on this policy interpretation that will affect an industry that was exempted from the Bureau oversight. The lack of accountability and congressional oversight over the Bureau's budget and director are troubling, to say the least. But the picture becomes even more concerning when the lens is shifted to what kinds of oversight power are afforded to and being practiced by this Bureau, this Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. Sounds like it's for everybody. Here's what I said when expressing my concern about this Bureau and the Dodd-Frank Act on May 20th, 2010. I said this bill was supposed to be about regulating Wall Street. Instead, it's creating a Google Earth on every financial transaction. That's right. The government will be able to see every detail of your finances. Your permission? Not needed. They can look at your transactions from the 50,000-foot perspective, or they can look right down to the tiny details of the time and place where you pulled cash out of an ATM or charged your credit card. Unfortunately, we're now finding this fear has become a reality. A recent Bloomberg article states that the Bureau is demanding records from banks and buying information from companies on at least 10 million American consumers for use in a wide range of policy research projects. This information gathering from banks includes credit card and checking account overdraft information, as well as requirements to provide records on credit card add-on products like credit monitoring. In addition to the bank records it's collecting, the Bureau is collecting data on payday loans from debt collection agencies and building a mortgage database of loan and property records with information from agencies and other financial and property information holders. The CFPB also says they are not including any personally identifiable information like names and Social Security numbers while compiling all of this information. Now, I made that statement at one of my listening sessions in Wyoming, and somebody from the audience yelled, "No, they'll just check with the NSA." What they are doing is taking all of that consumer data and layering it into consumer profiles to show a complete snapshot of each consumer's finances. For example, they can say, there's a consumer at a specified zip code who has $1,500 in the bank, $6,000 in credit card debt, $10,000 in student loan debt, and a $200,000 mortgage. To the American people listening to me, who are listening to me speak right now, what happens if you are the one of the 10 million customers whose data is being collected? Does this make you angry and uncomfortable? What happens if you don't want all of your financial information compiled and used by the Bureau for policy research projects? I'm sure you'd like to hear me tell you that you can call or write the Bureau and say you don't want the Bureau collecting your financial records from your bank, your student loan information from a third-party provider, or your mortgage data, or your ATM data. I'm sorry. You can't. You can't tell them to stay out of your records. It's not possible. If your data is being collected, you do not have the option to opt out. Nor does the CFPB need any kind of permission from you to gather your personal financial information. This is another issue I tried to work with when the Dodd-Frank Act passed. I had an amendment that would simply require a privacy release, a signature from the consumer, before the Bureau could collect the consumer's financial data. Unfortunately, my amendment was not accepted, and we find ourselves in the situation we're in today. Americans cannot tell the government they don't want their personal financial information collected and stored. What I'd like to know is how this information is reigning in Wall Street. The Dodd-Frank Act was sold to the public as a way to rein in Wall Street. But as far as I can tell, it's turned out to be the perfect excuse for Big Brother to worm his way even further into our lives and our privacy. Actually, Big Brother doesn't have to worm his way in. Dodd-Frank opened the door and invited him in. That's what this lack of oversight is signaling. Go ahead and collect millions of consumers' information. Don't tell us what you're using it for. And don't feel the need to tell us much of anything else, because this director and this Bureau will not be accountable to Congress. Meanwhile, the message we're getting from the Bureau and some of my colleagues is that Congress needs to sit back and butt out of the Bureau's business. We're hearing the message that asking for congressional oversight is akin to wanting consumers to be deceived and discriminated against. Let's get one thing straight. None of my colleagues disagree that protecting consumers is important. We all want consumers to get a fair shake and be able to make informed financial decisions. I never envisioned the federal government making your financial decisions. I have championed financial literacy for much of my time in Washington and believe strongly in the value of individuals having the tools they need to make sound financial decisions for themselves and their families. And I repeat, I never envisioned the federal government making your financial decisions. That's not the issue here. The issue here is the need for checks and balances and for consumers to be able to make a choice as to whether their financial information is collected and used. I cannot, in good conscience, with these concerns weighing so heavily on my mind, support moving forward with the confirmation of a director to the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, the one already in charge of collecting your financial records, while doing a daily speech about his good work. Wait until his confirmation and you'll see more intrusion into your personal life. until it's changed so this man does not have this much power, power beyond anybody else in the federal government. Unless we can make some changes that will balance consumer protections with privacy protections and allow a healthy and appropriate level of congressional oversight over an agency that wields this tremendous power and has its own source of revenue and no oversight, not even an inspector general. Until that happens, I have to oppose this nomination, and I hope my colleagues will join me. I yield the floor.
Mr. President, Senator from New Mexico. Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I wanted to talk a little bit today about, and I ask consent to speak for 5 minutes. Is there objection? Without objection. Mr. President, I wanted to talk about the rules and what we engaged in yesterday, which I thought was a very productive endeavor, to have 3 hours with most senators in the room in the old Senate chambers and be able to exchange our thoughts outside of the limelight, and I believe it was very productive, and we had a lot of ideas come forward. Some of those ideas to resolve this situation may end up being adopted here in a little bit. It looks like Richard Cordray, the Attorney General from Ohio, will get cloture at this point. At least that's the way it's looking, and then we'll have some debate on that nomination. But a couple of other points. First of all, Leader Reid has incredible patience when it comes to this whole issue of executive nominations. I've seen him over and over again be beyond the pale when it comes to patience. And at this point, he realized we were getting things clogged up, there was too much obstruction, and so he needed to force the issue, and I'm very proud that he has, because I think it's pushed us in the right direction. We're going to get executive nominees in place on a timely basis, and we're going to get rid of all the delay we've had. I look back in history when we talk about executive nominees, and I remember my father when he became Secretary of Interior there in 1961, and I had told him when I was first sworn into the Senate and came home that we were having a hard time getting executive nominees in place. And he said, Tom, the amazing thing, if you highlight that 50 years ago and 50 years later here, is that we have had, I had my whole team in place in 2 weeks, my entire team in place in 2 weeks. Well, here we are, the 5th year into President Obama, and he doesn't have his team in place. And so that's really what the issue is here, and I know that we're focusing on that and trying to do everything we can to find a solution to how we allow a president who's been reelected and by a pretty good margin to have his team in place. And I'm very, let me say that I'm very confident that Senator John McCain, who I know is working on the compromise, a good friend of the family, somebody who really cares about moving forward with the issues rather than obstructing. He was a part of the Gang of 14, as everybody knows. Senator McCain came up with that compromise with 13 other senators to move us forward in terms of the gridlock that we were facing with judicial nominations. And so I hope that the discussions are taking place are going to produce something, but I think it's a big breakthrough. It's a big breakthrough to see that we are at the point where Richard Cordray, who's been waiting for 2 years, this is a very competent individual. He has served as the Attorney General of Ohio, one of our biggest states, a great consumer protection person, and that he is now going to, we'll get cloture, we'll have debate, but my sense is we're going to get him into that consumer agency, and it'll make a big difference. Just as a final thing here, and I see my good friend Senator Corker, so I want to make sure he gets to speak before we have this 11 o'clock vote. I have a fuller statement here. I'd like to, with consent, put my full statement into the record as if spoken.
Without objection.
And I would yield the floor. Thank you.
Mr. President.
Senator from Tennessee.
Mr. President, thank you. And I want to say that I thought last night's meeting was a very healthy meeting. I'm glad that we did what we did. I appreciate the two leaders sponsoring that, and I certainly appreciate the tone with which everyone spoke. I do think that with a lot of phone calls having been made this morning, that we will move past the cloture vote on Mr. Cordray. I've had several conversations with him this morning and others. But I do want to say this is a gesture of good faith, and I know there are still numbers of things. If it occurs, we'll still see. I mean, we'll see what happens here in a moment when the vote takes place, and obviously in this body nothing happens until it happens. But I do hope that members on the other side will note this good faith effort that's taking place here in a few moments. I hope it's going to happen. I think it may. But I do hope over the course of the next 24 hours, 48 hours, we can work on things in a little bit more comprehensive manner, okay? I think that this would be something to get behind us during this next year and a half and move on to solving our nation's problems. I don't think it's healthy for this body to constantly have potential rules changes hanging over the issues of our nation. And we have big issues. We have an opportunity potentially to get the immigration issue behind us. I know there's other pieces of legislation we could well deal with. And in the event we do move into this post-cloture period, I hope that members on the other side of the aisle will take note of that and will work with us constructively towards a solution that brings this place together instead of pulling it apart. And I thank the Senator for his efforts. Again, I empathize and sympathize with he and his family over the personal loss that has just occurred, and I look forward to working with him as we move ahead. I yield the floor.